Israel finds itself once again at the center of a storm. Missiles from Yemen, pleas from hostage families, and executions in Iran that raise troubling questions about justice and double standards. Israel now stands at a pivotal moment, forced to defend itself across multiple fronts, pressured to negotiate for lives, and entangled in a brutal regional intelligence war. The stakes are existential as missiles fly, hostage wait, and regimes execute in darkness. The world must ask who is the aggressor and who is the protector. This is not merely a conflict of arms, it is a test of moral clarity. Welcome to the Flash News. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Before we get into our focus on today's Flash News, we see that the Ambazonian Strategic Constituent Assembly, the ASCA, held a 2-day strategic session from Saturday, September 27th to Sunday, September 28th, 2025. The gathering came just days ahead of the October 1st Independence Day celebrations, marking a critical moment for the movement's leadership and vision. Now, the first day featured productive deliberations that set the tone for the assembly. On the second day, which resumed at 3 p.m. Amba time, the agenda shifted to key issues on diplomacy, governance, and reform. Session 2 opened with an in-depth look at the complexities of negotiations between two countries in conflict resolution, highlighting strides made so far in diplomacy under the leadership of President Samuel Sako. Professor Epote presented the affirmation and administrative directives to the president, reaffirming confidence in Sako's leadership. Accepting the mandate to continue as president, Sako pledged to remain committed to the journey to Boya, but reminded participants, "Don't deprive me of support and expect results." The assembly also explored visions for Amazonian future, the future society of Ambazonia. Professor Epote made a powerful presentation on education, emphasizing the kind of society Ambazonians aspire to build. Secretary Steve followed with insights into structural reforms and grassroots remobilization, described by many as an eye-opening sessions that underscore the importance of reconnecting leadership with the people. Dr. Tom Ndula rounded off the day with a presentation on the codes of ethics, stressing that it must stand as the law guiding those in authority. His intervention highlighted the need for integrity, accountability, and discipline in the pursuit of Ambazonia's liberation goals. The 2-day Ambazonian Strategic Constituent Assembly session thus closed with renewed energy, a strengthened leadership mandate, and an emphasis on diplomacy, reforms, education, and ethical governance as Ambazonia prepares to mark October 1st. With that, we'll go back to the focus. We'll go on to the focus on today's Flash News, the war with Israel. Overnight, Yemen's Houthi rebels claimed responsibility for launching a hypersonic ballistic missile and 2 drones at targets in Israel. The missile, according to Houthi sources, carried a cluster warhead aimed at sensitive areas near Tel Aviv, while the drones were directed at Eilat. Israel's defense forces intercepted the missile before it struck, preventing casualties, though the attack underscores how far-reaching Iran-backed proxies have become in their attempt to target Israeli innocent civilians. Now, this is not the first time. The Houthis, who loudly declare their solidarity with Gaza, have in recent weeks escalated their campaign with repeated missile and drone attacks across the Red Sea corridor. Israel has responded with precision airstrikes on Houthi military sites in Sana'a, targeting command centers and weapons stockpiles. Yet the larger question lingers. If Israel is forced to shield its skies against an enemy that sends cluster munitions towards crowded cities where civilians reside? Is it not justified in striking back with equal determination? Meanwhile, Trump has talked about a 21-point planned peace proposal, and when asked about the 21-point planned peace proposal, this is what Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say in an interview on Fox News. Take a listen.
We're working on it, Jackie. It's not been finalized yet, but we're working with President Trump's team, actually as we speak, and I hope we can make it a go because we want to free our hostages. We want to get rid of Hamas rule and have them disarmed, Gaza demilitarized, and a new future set up for Gazans and Israelis alike, and for the whole region.
Oh yeah, still about the meeting, Vice President J.D. Vance was quite optimistic about the meeting. Well, let's take a listen to his remark about this meeting, still courtesy of Fox News.
Of course, between the Trump administration led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So those conversations are happening as we speak. They're ongoing over the course of the past couple of days. I'm going to let those negotiations play out, but I think the president's optimism is warranted here. I feel more optimistic about where we are right now than where we have been at any point in the last few months, but let's be realistic. These things can get derailed at the very last minute. So while I remain very hopeful, I am cautiously hopeful. I'm going to let the diplomats continue to work on this. But our principle here is very simple. We want all the hostages to come home. We want Hamas to no longer be a terror threat to the state of Israel. And we also want to bring the humanitarian aid in Gaza for the many innocent people who are caught up in the conflict. So I think we're close to accomplishing all three of those objectives.
Well, on another hand, the families of Israeli hostages still held in Gaza are intensifying their calls for action. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum, which represents dozens of abducted and missing Israelis, has appealed directly to President Trump to secure a release deal before his upcoming meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. These families know that every day without action is another day their loved ones may face torture, starvation, or execution at the hands of Hamas, a group that has repeatedly shown itself to be savage in its methods and ruthless in its disregard for human life. Now, their message is simple. Diplomacy cannot wait. While leaders weigh strategies and political calculations, the hostages remain human beings trapped in cages of terror. And so the plea echoes across Israel and beyond. Should the world stand idle while mothers, fathers, and children are used as bargaining chips is the question. Now, as these pressures mount, another front of this war has intensified in Iran. Authorities in Tehran announced the execution of Bahman Chubaisal, described by the regime's judiciary as one of the most important Israeli spies in the country. Now, this is the 10th such executions following such accusations in just a few months following the 12-day war in June. Iran claimed Chubaisal orchestrated intelligence breaches and worked to undermine its security, yet rights groups warn that such confessions are often forced under torture. Now, here is the troubling irony. When Iran hangs accused spies without transparency, much of the world shrugs it off. But if Israel were to execute suspected Iranian operatives under similar circumstances, will the international community's reaction not be one of immediate outrage and condemnation? Should double standards really be the measure by which wars and justice are being judged? So Israel is caught in a web of pressures. On one side, missiles and drones rain down from Iran-aligned Houthis who openly boast of targeting civilians. On another, anguished families beg for swift negotiations to bring home hostages still brutalized by Hamas. And in the shadows, Iran carries out executions meant to show strength, but which instead expose the cruelty of a regime willing to take lives without due process. Now, through it all, Hamas remains the central instigator. Through it all, the organization that began this chain of suffering by storming into Israel, murdering, abducting, terrorizing civilians, and frying babies in front of their parents, it brands itself as resistance. Yet its record is one of massacres, kidnapping, and war crimes. Israel, for its part, is portrayed as the aggressor whenever it defends itself from such brutal fronts. But then the question begs to be answered. In a world that condemns Israel's defenses while excusing terror, who truly holds the moral high ground? Israel today is forced to navigate a battlefield of missiles, diplomacy, and intelligence wars with its very survival on the line. As it shields its people from hypersonic rockets, pleads for the return of its hostages, and watches Iran carry out executions. The larger struggle is not only about land or politics, it is about clarity. Clarity over who is defending life and who is destroying it. Now on to the rest of the news across the globe. We see a gunman crashed a vehicle into a Mormon church in Grand Blanc, Michigan, then opened fire and set the building ablaze during Sunday services. Authorities say at least 4 people were killed and 8 more wounded. The assailant, identified as Thomas Jacob Sanford, a 40-year-old former United States Marine, was shot dead by police within minutes. Inside the church, congregants had no warning. What was meant to be a sanctuary turned into a scene of horror. Investigators are now sifting through debris and phone records, striving to uncover motive. The FBI is treating these as an act of targeted violence and has deployed over 100 agents to the site. Religious spaces are meant to be places of refuge. When they become battlegrounds, we are forced to ask the question, what drives someone to turn worship into terror, and what security measures would communities now demand of their sanctuaries? Well, from the United States, we shift to Lima, Peru, where protests erupted against President Dina Boluarte's government, leaving at least 19 people injured. Demonstrators are decrying corruption, pension reforms, and rising organized crime. Many marchers came from younger generations, frustrated with institutions they view as deeply compromised. A recent controversial law requiring young adults to join private pension funds only fueled the anger. The government, already under scrutiny for alleged misconduct and prior protest deaths, faces rising legitimacy crisis. Public dissent in Peru has often been met with force as the streets feel the balance between security and suppression becomes delicate. Will his regime heed demands for reform or double down on the control he already has? But away from that, we see that in Washington, President Donald Trump has renewed demands that the Taliban relinquish Bagram Air Base, a major United States military hub, before the 2021 withdrawal. He says the base belongs to those who built it and has warned of consequences if Kabul refuses. But the Taliban reject the demand outright, insisting that Afghanistan will never cede an inch of its soil. They invoke the 2020 Doha Agreement, which explicitly bars the United States from using force against Afghan territorial integrity. Strategically, Bagram is still coveted. It gives reach over Kabul's northern corridors and lies in a region where great power axes intersect. But the Taliban's refusal suggests retaking it would require more than rhetoric and might reignite a deeper conflict. But then for the final reports, we see that far to the north in Chisinau, Moldova's pro-European Action and Solidarity Party, Pleas, has won a parliamentary majority in a critical election, securing about 50.2% of votes versus 24.2% of the pro-Russian bloc. The victory is seen as a clear mandate to deepen integration with the European Union and a rejection of Moscow's influence. European Union leaders warmly welcomed the result, while the Kremlin accused Moldova of disenfranchising citizens abroad, especially in Russia, by limiting polling stations. Moldova is often portrayed as a front line of influence between East and West. With this outcome, Chisinau may accelerate reforms and the EU alignment, but it must also contend with internal challenges, economic strain, Russian interference, and regional instability. From the shocking church attack in Michigan to political upheavals in Peru and Moldova, and Trump's renewed challenge over Afghanistan Taliban, today's news paints a picture of a world on edge where scrutiny, security, faith, and governance are still being tested. Yet at the center of the world's most consequential conflict, Israel today is forced to navigate a battlefield of missiles, diplomacy, and intelligence wars, with its very survival on the line. As it shields its people from hypersonic rockets, pleads for the return of its hostages, and watches Iran carry out executions, the larger struggle is not only about land or politics, it is about clarity. Clarity over who is defending life and who is destroying it. With that, we've come to the end of today's Flash News. Thank you for joining.